Welcome back to the Deep Dive. And today we're really undertaking an ambitious analysis.
I would say so.
We're going to be immersing ourselves in the philosophical, the theological claims, all from these excerpts of a 1977 address by Sun Myung Moon. It's called The Principle of Love and Eternal Happiness.
And this is a challenging source. I mean, it really is, because
Yeah.
it tries to redefine these huge fundamental concepts: happiness, purpose, conflict, even the nature of God himself. And it centers them all around one single idea:
Love.
love. So our mission here is to distill the speaker's ideology, explore his, well, radical definition of love, his universal blueprint for happiness, and this really powerful cosmic claim that love is the central animating force behind everything.
And what immediately strikes you right from the get-go is the starting premise about happiness. This philosophy, it doesn't start with morality or rules. It starts with an operational definition of joy.
Yeah, for most people, happiness is about acquisition, right? Getting the job, the
The
house.
perfect relationship. But this framework
Yeah.
it throws that right out the window.
Yeah, it does. It defines unhappiness in a really surprising way.
Yeah.
It's not about what you lack materially, but it's about a missing relational dynamic. Unhappiness is just the condition where a person does not have an object to whom he can freely give, or from whom he can freely receive.
So your happiness is directly proportional to how much of that give and take you can experience.
Exactly, that reciprocal flow.
Okay, so let's unpack that using the analogies in the source. They are incredibly vivid. It argues that if you have the world's largest, most brilliant diamond, but have absolutely no one to share it with, that diamond brings you zero excitement. Why?
Because the object is there, the diamond. But that critical reciprocal relationship you need for value transfer, it's just non-existent. You're the subject, the diamond's the object, but there's no mechanism for that energy to flow.
So it's just a static possession.
A static possession.
Yeah.
Not a source of stimulation that can be shared, that can be appreciated.
That makes a lot of sense. It completely reframes value. And you see the same thing in the example of the blind person. We assume their unhappiness is just from not being able to see, but the source says it's deeper.
Right. The blindness is tragic because the eyes, which are these essential instruments for creating those reciprocal relationships, identifying an object, confirming its value, starting that flow,
The broken.
they're broken. The person is cut off from that dynamic exchange with the visual world.
Even something as basic as physical pain like hunger gets defined as a broken give and take. A hungry person is unhappy because their reciprocal relationship with the physical world, specifically, the necessary object of food, has been disrupted. It highlights that everything, down to the molecular level, requires this flow.
Which leads to the really critical question: what enables this perfect reciprocal action? I mean, the source is clear that give and take is just movement. The force that perfects it is love.
But it clarifies that love itself does not have any meaning unless it's connecting two distinct units into perfect harmony.
Yes. So love isn't just a feeling inside of you.
It's an energetic force.
It's the universal force
Right.
that unites a subject and an object and makes their respective and often very different values equal.
So it's the great equalizer.
Precisely. Think about the example of marriage that's used in the address.
Mm.
A rough-bearded tall man and a short, smooth-skinned woman. Separately, their values are totally different, uneven. But when true love unites them, they share each other's characteristics. They merge their values.
And the value of the resulting unit becomes exponentially greater.
Exactly. Love is the great equalizer and the great multiplier of value.
Okay, so if that dynamic is the fundamental operating system for the entire universe, then we have to pivot. We have to ask, what is the ultimate purpose of human life within this whole system? Because the speaker explicitly rejects a whole host of conventional modern pursuits.
And this is a crucial pivot point. This ideology is very, very clear about what man is not here for. We're not here merely to eat to satisfy the body, which the speaker labels the communist view focused purely on material need.
Right, and we're not just here to work and produce goods, which he links to the democratic capitalist view of working your 9 to 5 and optimizing efficiency.
And it goes further than that. It dismisses intellectual pursuits, studying, chasing power or money, or even creating and enjoying these great masterpieces of art.
Which is strange because those seem like the peak of human achievement. Why are they rejected?
They're important, but they're deemed insufficient. They only satisfy one side of the human equation, the physical or the intellectual or the spiritual, but not the whole self. They leave the body and spirit searching for something more.
Something grander.
Something grander. The ultimate overarching purpose is to live for true love. This is the only pursuit, the source argues, that is large enough to fill both the body and the spirit completely.
So joy and happiness aren't the mission. They're just the inevitable result of successfully pursuing this perfection of love. It's a pursuit of wholeness.
Exactly. It sets up love as the prerequisite for purpose,
Yeah.
not just some emotional byproduct.
And the blueprint for this perfect, unifying love is most clearly seen in the relationship between men and women. The observations here are very specific and maybe startling to a modern listener.
I would agree with that.
The source looks at young boys and girls, boys being aggressive rascals who destroy everything, and girls interested in quiet games and dolls, and he notes how impossible they seem to unite.
Yet love is the mysterious power that brings those opposite forces together. And the speaker gets into the specific dynamics of attraction. He observed that women mature faster in the pursuit of love, described almost humorously as sending out waves of love first or,
Throwing some bait?
right, throwing some bait. Men, by contrast, are seen as rather dumb and slow in responding to that initial illumination.
And that distinction, the woman as the proactive initiator, the illumination, is tied directly into this supposed divine blueprint for creation. The source claims that when God created man, he already had the blueprint of woman in mind and vice versa.
It just solidifies this idea that our existence is inherently relational. The purpose of creation was never for a single isolated unit, but for the consummation of love between dual units. We were born, we grew, we're meant to perfect ourselves so that we can enter that relationship of ultimate reciprocal value.
Okay, so once we establish that personal foundation, we have to scale this idea up to society, to the cosmos. And here's where it gets really interesting. If love is the core motivator for all creation, how does this philosophy explain something like war or conflict?
Well, the source argues that even conflict is fundamentally rooted in a corrupted desire for love. War arises when the necessary circuits of love between people or nations are severed.
So conquering someone is, what, a perverse attempt to resume some kind of give and take?
Exactly, even if that exchange is domination instead of mutual respect. It's a forced relationship.
So it redefines hate as just a symptom of a broken love connection. And the ultimate solution, according to this framework,
Is perfect love. It's so powerful that it can actually melt the heart of an enemy. And this profound cosmic power of love is the basis for the speaker's political critique, specifically levels against materialism and communism.
okay, so if love is the greatest force, centering an ideology on matter must fail. Why exactly?
It's a principle of size and supremacy. The source asks, how can love, the greatest force in the universe, the infinite subject, be contained in something as small as matter? It argues that matter is just the passive object, while love is the infinite driving subject.
So if your foundation matter is fixed and small, the entire structure is flawed from the start.
It's flawed. It can't grow, it can't transcend, and therefore it can never conquer the world or establish the utopia it promises. To truly achieve that ideal world, the source insists they would have to proclaim love, the infinite subject, as supreme.
That's a highly philosophical reason for political failure. The size of the container matters. Now, moving from politics to pure philosophy, this framework also tucks on the question of God's existence. And trying to prove God scientifically is described as inherently foolish.
Yeah, it's an argument about scale, about the limits of human comprehension. The speaker suggests that if human logic could prove God's existence, then God would have to be small enough to fit inside that logic.
Which would mean man could fully know him, maybe even create him.
Exactly. The very fact that we can't even fully grasp the complexity of our own minds, the source argues, proves the immense greatness of man, and by extension, the incomprehensible mystery and scale of God.
And this is why, the philosophy suggests, religious people are inherently wiser than purely logical philosophers or scientists. The religious person accepts God's eternal existence through faith,
Which is an act of love and unity, connecting them to the infinite. And we're reminded that the greatest contributors to history weren't just intellectual giants, but saints, Moses, Buddha, Muhammad, St. Francis, all of whom centered their lives on this pursuit of love.
vertical love God and man, and horizontal love man and man.
Their impact came from connection, not from calculation.
This brings us to the core of the speaker's radical theological claim. And this is probably the most astonishing reversal of power dynamics in the entire address. The traditional view holds God as infinitely sovereign and distant.
And man as sinful and separate.
Yes, this framework closes that gap completely.
It presents man as God's indispensable partner and object. The source is explicit. Without your object, you cannot be subject. This means that God cannot be God, the loving subject without man. his loving object. Without man, God would essentially vanish in terms of his identity and relational fulfillment.
Wait. So the claim is that unless man perfects himself, God remains incomplete. God a failure.
That is the direct claim. Man is required to complete the circle of love. It's a monumental shift in theological thinking because it gives man this existential value not just as a creation, but as a necessary partner.
And this mutual necessity.
Yeah.
That's what gives man immense power.
It is. And how is that power manifested?
Through love, of course.
Through love.
Mm.
The address claims that if man successfully achieves and directs a beam of true love into God's heart, God is rendered helpless and must surrender, recognizing the absolute supremacy of that perfect, genuine love.
It elevates true love above divinity itself.
It really does. It suggests that while God created man, the quality of man's perfected love can transcend the Creator's original design, effectively giving man the power to lead God around any way he wants.
That is the ultimate aha moment in this philosophy. So how does one actually live up to this almost impossible standard? How do you perfect this love? The speaker gives a specific window into the daily life of Unification Church members, explaining why they are described as happy.
They're working toward a living God, not a conceptual God.
Right. And the path to perfection often involves acts that deliberately reject worldly status and logic, which leads us to what he calls the peanuts and flowers philosophy. And I find this philosophy utterly counterintuitive, and that's why it's so powerful. You have members with advanced academic degrees, PhDs, who are asked to go out and fundraise using incredibly simple, lowly objects.
Like peanuts or flowers?
Exactly. Why does the philosophy insist on this specific, you might even say demeaning, sacrifice?
It's a test of absolute unselfishness and a method of restoration. The person has to learn to love all things of creation, restoring the dignity of those lowly objects. The THD has to realize that their academic status is meaningless in the face of this larger principle.
So by loving the peanuts, by elevating their value as a creation of God,
The individual demonstrates they can love all of mankind equally and ultimately God himself. It flips the script. The human's acquired status is secondary to the humility required to serve. The peanuts, he says, feel their dignity restored by this unselfish act.
and that standard is difficult to maintain. The speaker openly embraces the resulting persecution and criticism. He says, I even welcome it.
Because the dedication of the members, enduring long hours, defying their parents, enduring criticism from the press, having sweat replace perfume, it can't be understood by logic or science.
The only explanation, according to the source, is knowing the love of God. This philosophy sets the highest standard in history, designed specifically to elevate members beyond the fallen state of Adam and Eve to ensure eternal unity with God.
And the entire history of spiritual seeking in this framework is just God attempting to restore this true, original order of love.
Which brings us to the final distinction between serving love and selfish love. True love means giving and serving others. Selfish love, which the address contrasts with practices like free sex, which is rampant in America today, is temporal and inherently destructive.
Because the law of give and take applies eternally. When you give love, it always returns with a plus. It multiplies and prospers. If you take love selfishly, it returns with a minus, leaving you depleted and diminished.
So the call to action for you, the listener, is remarkably immediate. Practice breathing love here on earth. Why the emphasis on practicing now?
Because love, this philosophy claims, is the very atmosphere of the spirit world. You have to train to breathe it here if you want to survive there.
And this brings us back full circle to the immense radical value placed on the created partner. If God needs man and is rendered helpless by man's perfect love, what is the ultimate goal?
Well, the speaker proposes that the ultimate ambition for a son or daughter of God isn't just to be like God, but to reach a point where they are better than God, more handsome, more dramatic, more complete in their love, causing God to exclaim, I surrender to you.
That is a staggering thought. If the Creator recognizes the supremacy of genuine love and surrenders to the perfected love of the created, how does that fundamentally change your personal understanding of your potential and your relationship to the divine?
If the bar isn't just to achieve righteousness, but to achieve a perfection so profound that it compels the Creator's surrender, it completely redefines the boundaries of personal ambition and the infinite nature of true love. That's something to mull over until our next deep dive.